Hey everyone, welcome back to the White Coat Club. My name is Nicole and I'm one of the counselors at Moon Prep. So today I have Kieran with me and he's new to the podcast. So we'll get to introducing him in just a second. But today we're going to be talking about letters of rec. I know we're in August now, so it's definitely the time we've been getting a ton of questions. So as always, don't forget to like and subscribe to get more BSMD and medical school advice. Hey Kieran,
Hey, how's it going, Nicole?
I'm good. How are you?
I am good. I mean, it's a busy time right now, but that's a good thing. I like to be busy.
Yeah, August is definitely ramping up and when things start to ramp up. So just since you're new on the podcast, just if you want to give us a little bit of background for some of our listeners who don't know you.
Yeah, sure. So I'm a counselor here at Moon Prep. I've been with Moon Prep for 3 cycles. I help both undergrads who are applying to college, applying to BSMD programs, but I also work with students who are applying to medical school, applying to DO schools as well. So really just try to have my hands in all the things that Moon Prep is doing, and now including the podcast as well.
Awesome. Well, we're very happy to have you. Um, so why don't you start to break down what the topic is for today and we'll just get straight into it.
Yes, we wanted to talk about this because I feel like this time of year, I'm always getting tons of questions from students about letters of recommendation. And so we thought that we would go through sort of the basics of what you should be looking for with a letter of rec and how to kind of go about it. And then we will move on to some frequently asked questions just to try to address the kinds of things that I hear from my students kind of over and over again at this time of year. Um, but I think let's start with the basics. So, first of all, letters of recommendation, I guess maybe we can say, what are they? Why are they an important part of the college application process?
Yeah, so it's really going to be the advice or background of you from your teachers at your school and sometimes outside people as well. What this is doing for the admissions team is just getting an outside perspective as to who you are in the classroom or in the workplace, if it's an outside recommender, what kind of person you are in general, what kind of student you are. Um, and it's really just to see, if they are interested in having you in their classroom on their campus, they want to see how you are in your classroom on your campus currently. Um, so sometimes schools will ask teachers, one or more, we'll get into all of that, just to kind of give a little background on you.
Yeah, and I think it's just a nice way to get another perspective on the applicant for the application readers as well. I think in a college application, we know all of the ways that we can sort of puff up our chests and make ourselves seem, really impressive and really interesting. But it's really nice to then have that perspective from someone else to say, yes, this
Mhm.
student is excellent. I really enjoy having this student in my class. This student is engaging with the material at a level that is, much higher or much deeper than my typical students, things like that. So it's just a really nice way to kind of round out the picture and to hear from someone who's not the applicant themselves as
Yeah.
they're putting their application together. Um, so with that in mind, who is the right person to ask to write a letter of recommendation for you?
Yeah, so typically we're going to be looking for teachers, hopefully from 11th grade, if not maybe 10th grade. We try to avoid younger year teachers and then teachers who were teaching you in an accelerated subject content if possible, or a core subject. So if you're a BSMD student, we're definitely looking towards the maths and sciences, sometimes in English. We want to avoid a gym teacher. We want to avoid really an elective teacher most times. Sometimes if the teacher has a dual role at your school, maybe they're like the chess club teacher and your AP bio teacher, that would be ideal. They've seen you in multiple aspects. And typically we're asking 2 to 3 teachers. We'll get into how you'll know really what you'll need. Typically, when we start off, we're asking 2 to 3 because some may not say yes. And then we're usually asking 1 to 2 outside recommenders as well who to ask there, if you shadowed or did research under someone specifically, or if you even if it's not a doctor there, but you were shadowing or volunteering and it was like the on-call nurse or something that you've like reported to, even if they're not a doctor, but the person that you like reported to when you were there, that would be a great person to ask as well.
Yeah, and I feel like students usually are pretty good at coming up with a list of like, oh, I could ask this person, I could ask that person. But often they ask me like, what makes a good recommender? Like, what sort of qualities should you be looking for in thinking about, who's potentially going to write the best letter for me?
Yeah. Obviously, we look to teachers that you have a good rapport with. I'm thinking, who will write something nice about you. If you don't have the best track record with maybe one of your teachers, maybe not the best. Um, Someone that's a good communicator. So a lot of kids will lean to English sometimes because they know that their writing skills are going to be strong. I often look to veteran teachers too, who've been doing this for a while. Sometimes newer teachers, when I worked as a school counselor, a lot of times I would have the newer teachers in my office, like, what does this mean? What am I supposed to do? And they don't understand, or they're just newer to it. Like a first year teacher, while they're very eager to please their students, I think sometimes they don't really know exactly what is needed. So, really anyone, a good recommender, someone that you have a great rapport with. And then if they're newer, hopefully they'll have the support staff at their school to kind of get the roundabout idea of what is required and good for the student's best interest.
Yeah, I totally agree. I often tell my students to think about like their relationships, like who's the teacher that you have the best relationship with or one of the longest relationships with. I also sometimes will have them think about the application as a whole. So, like if we're talking about a certain activity, and that activity is going to be really prominent in your activity lists, and maybe it's even going to show up in one of your essays as well. Sometimes it's nice to then also have a letter of recommendation that is related to that activity so that your application starts to kind of come together as like a cohesive whole. Not necessarily that you're repeating things, but that different portions of your application are all like supporting each other. So that's another place to look. Like if you spend a lot of time doing a research project, having like your lab PI or someone like that then also be a recommender just helps to reinforce what an important project that was for you.
Yeah, that's great advice.
So the other question I feel like I get a lot about this is not just who to ask, but when to ask. So when is the right time that you should be actually approaching a recommender to see if they will write a recommendation for you for college?
Typically mid-spring. If you are someone that's out of school, anytime between March, April, May, is really ideal before 11th grade is over.
But Nicole, it's August. We're recording this podcast now. What do I do?
So at this point, get ready. Get ready to ask them in September or late August, whenever you start back at school. I mean, some of you have already started school at this point, depending on where you are. Ideally, that's when you ask. So if you're a younger student listening, yes, I am going to repeat myself and say spring. If not, once you get back to school, that should be first on your list. Maybe not first day, maybe not second day, because it's very, very chaotic, but asking in person first week of school, following up with an email. I think I'm probably getting into your next question with that. Is probably how um, you want to be asking in person is always my recommendation, and then following up with an email.
Yeah, I totally agree about asking in person. I think that's the best way to do it. So when you're in school, is usually the best time. Usually over the summer as well. Teachers are not necessarily checking their school emails all that often, so that is usually not a great time to ask. So you want to think about in school, either end of the spring or beginning of the fall. Also, sometimes schools will have rules about like when you're allowed to ask your teachers for recommendations. So just make sure that you're following any sort of guidelines that your school has for this process as well. Um, so let's imagine that we've done all of that. We have identified a good person. We've asked them. They've said yes. We did it in person. We followed up with an email. We did all of those things. Is there anything that you should give your recommender as they're starting to work on writing a letter for you?
Yeah, so some schools will tell you like here's a brag sheet format or a template that they'll give you to fill out to give to them. If not, you will want to send them a copy of your resume or if you have your activity list of things that you've done. Um, a combination of the two of those, or, even just additional information in the email. If like you have your activity list and then you want to say like, hey, by the way, um, I'm up for student body president this year, like FYI, like it's not an activity yet, but I'm going to be running, like just some additional information. You want to make it easier for them. I think t students assume teachers remember every single thing about every single student, and maybe they do, but it's so hard. So any little information you could give them is helpful. And then another thing that I would recommend doing is let them know I will be applying by the early action deadline, or I will be early decisioning to a school, and letting them know because admission cycle is kind of broad, and if they're working on you plus 20, 30 other students, you need to make sure that they know that you need this earlier on, by that November 1st date.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful talking about the timeline, but even just talking to them about like, here's the kinds of schools that I'm applying to, here's the kinds of programs I'm applying to. I mean, that'll help them shape their letter. So I think any sort of extra context you can give them is always really good.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Okay, so I think that covered kind of a lot of the sort of basics of letters of recommendation. Is there anything else that you feel like we haven't kind of touched in terms of the basics that we want to throw in there before we move to some of the frequently asked questions that I'm hearing from a lot of my students right now?
um I'm gonna say one more thing, and then I think we're probably ready to jump into the main questions. But this goes along with like what to give them, and I'm gonna say what not to give them is what you want them to say. Um, and I've had it happen. I've had parents email the teachers and say, I really want you to talk about when he did X, Y, and Z. And I don't love that. This is the time for the teachers to give their feedback to you. Another thing, keep in mind, and I think this is probably one of your questions, um, you will not see this recommendation before it gets to the schools. That's on purpose. That's intentional. Um, it's they don't want you to see them. That's kind of the whole point of this process. So asking them or telling them what you want them to say specifically, yes, you're going to give them all the information, but I've really had students and parents just say, like, I already wrote it for you. I just need you to send it, which is, not ideal.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really important point, and I think that's one of the points that makes letters of recommendation, I think, so confusing and sometimes even anxiety-inducing as we're moving through the application cycle, is that the schools really want your letters of recommendation to be coming directly from your recommender to the school. The purpose of everything we're about to talk about is that the school really doesn't want you touching your letters of recommendation in like any way, shape, or form. And so that's why when we're about to start talking about the process of how to do this, it's why the process sometimes seems a little bit confusing or a little bit convoluted, is because basically they're trying to work out a system where you don't see or interact with your letters of recommendation. And I think that's sometimes what makes this a little bit difficult to navigate. And I think it's also what creates a little bit of anxiety because in a lot of ways, it's like the one part of your application that you're not sort of directly in control of. But we'll talk about that as we move into the frequently asked questions as well.
Perfect.
All right, great. So here are questions that I'm hearing a lot, and I would just love to hear your take on them, Nicole. So first question, what letters of recommendation does a school or program require? How many do I need? How do I find this information?
Awesome. So I think I'll be pretty fast when rapid fire with some of these, because there's really no in between. It's like this and that's that. Um, what letters? Either it's teacher letters, counselor letters, and outside recommenders. Each school is different for what they require. Some will say you need two, some will say you need zero, some will say you need three, and then some will say two are required, one is optional. One is required, one is optional. It's a variation, which is why kind of earlier we had said, you're asking generally 2 to 3 teachers and generally 1 to 2 outside recommenders. How do you find this information? My favorite place to find it is on the Common App itself, or like on the application platform. It will straight up tell you, and on like the first page of that school, what the requirements are. You'll find it on their website on the admissions page as well, or if you're using their individual application, but on the application, regardless of where you're applying to that school through, it'll tell you what the requirements are. And almost every single school will require a counselor recommendation as well.
Yeah, and I think I just want to reiterate one of the points that you made there, which is really important, and that is that every school has their own individualized requirements. This is not standardized like across all schools, so you really need to be going into that My Colleges tab in your Common App, looking at the school information page, which is like the first thing that pops up when you click on a college in the Common App. And that's where they're going to tell you their individualized letters of recommendation requirements. And there are also some schools that don't accept letters of recommendation. It's rare, but it does happen. So just take a look out for that as well. Okay, so moving on to the next question is, but what if I have more letters of recommendation than a school requires? Am I able to send in more letters if I want to?
No. The schools are looking for what they're asking. They do not want you to continue to send things that they're not asking for. If they're asking for two, you cannot send three. Um, but you can hold some things into your back pocket. So not initially, but if you're on a wait list or if you need to send a letter of continued interest, they may ask you for something additional later on, but it's really great to follow the rules and do what they're asking you to do. I know we discussed this in a staff meeting recently, Kieran, where it was like, can you just send them various things, PowerPoints about you and all these other random facts about you to their admissions email? No, no. More than likely, they will not be reviewed. Likely they will just get, spammed and not looked at. So
Yeah, when I was in graduate school, I worked in an admissions office, and my job was literally like sorting through the mail of things that came in. So if people were sending additional information or letters of recommendation or anything like that, my job was to like receive it and then put it into the correct file, basically. And if we couldn't figure out how something fit into one of the application requirements, like we would just delete it, throw it away, whatever. And that is what is going on at all of these schools as well. So it's really important that you are reading the exact requirements and then sending in only what the school is asking for. There are schools that will say we require two, but we accept up to four. That's great. You can send them four letters, but don't send them five. Don't go beyond what they're asking for. What they're asking for is what they're asking for.
yeah.
Okay, so the next one that I'm getting a lot, especially at this time of year, is how to add recommenders in the Common App. So, how does the process of using the Common App to actually have your letter of recommendation get added and then sent out to schools? How does that work?
Yeah, so when you're in the My Colleges tab, you're really just going to click on the very first school that you, I guess, plan to apply to, or just the first one alphabetically on your list. You're gonna have to sign the Recommenders and FERPA release, which is the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, basically saying that you're understanding that they're going to submit a letter on your behalf. You're going to waive your rights to view it beforehand, and then you're going to add them in. So you can click add recommender. You're going to put their first and last name and their email address. You're going to press submit. Um, it's you can add as many, like, let's say one of your schools allows four, the other school only allows two. You're going to add them in. And then later, when you go to apply, you're going to click which ones you actually want them to now prompt an email to say, hey, Kieran applied to Penn State. Please use this link to add your letter for Kieran to Penn State. And that's going to prompt an email to those teachers or those outside recommenders to then upload an email on like a separate kind of portal, if you will.
Yeah, I
Um,
think one of the ways to think about this is that it's almost like you add your recommenders like into a bank on the
yes.
Common App, and then as you're putting in your applications for each school, you're selecting which letters
Mhm.
from your bank are going to go out to that school. So let's say that you added six letters, but you're applying to a school that only requires two letters, and one of them has to be from a science teacher. You go into your bank and you go, okay, I need my chemistry teacher to send a letter. And now I can send one more. Which letter do I think is going to be the best letter for the school? I'm going to select that one. And even though I've got six letters in my bank, only those two that I've selected are actually going to go out to that school.
Exactly. And it's pretty much the same for any other application portal, in terms of like the UC app, the SUNY app, the Texas app, Coalition. Um, if you're just applying to one school on its own website, it's only gonna allow you to pick the ones that they like are allowing you to do. So if you only need two, you'll just add two. But it's basically the same type of situation where the teachers will receive an email from whatever portal saying like this student name is requesting a letter.
Yeah,
which is
exactly.
why
And
you
that
want
way
to
you
tell
never
them.
see the letters, right? So it's just that you're putting in your recommender's contact information so that when you hit submit, they get contacted, and that's when they know that they need to upload the letter for that particular school.
Hmm. And then I will just say this too, like this is what you have to tell them that you're like, or you have to tell the teachers. I have gotten this before. I know people at my school have gotten this before that I worked at, where like Kieran requested for, Miss B to send in a letter of recommendation, but Kieran never asked Miss B to write him a letter of recommendation. And kids have done it. That's like a huge no.
Yeah, I think
So
that actually
definitely.
adds to the next question I was going to ask that I hear from students a lot, which is what does the recommender see? So, like when I apply to a school and I've said that Miss B is going to write my letter for me, what actually shows up on Miss B's computer or what happens with her as she's working on getting my letter uploaded?
Really not much. Really just that you applied. I think sometimes the date is there, or at least the deadline is there, but they don't see your application at all.
Yeah, and I think this is important too that they really only are gonna have to write like one letter. Like they shouldn't be writing like a brand new letter for every single school that you're applying to. And so it should just be a notification of like, now it is time to upload your letter. And because they don't really see a whole lot, there's also not really a lot of opportunity for you to try to be like, hey, I need you to, mention specifically that you're an alumni of this school, or I need you to mention that I've always dreamt about going to, whatever school this is. So they don't really see a whole lot. And so they just know that like, okay, now it's time to upload, and then they'll upload the letter they've already written. It's also important why we need to ask recommenders early, because you don't want them scrambling to try to meet your deadline.
Hmm.
Uh,
Exactly.
yeah, I've definitely seen that in the past as well, of like everything the application is in, but I'm still waiting on my recommender. My recommender hasn't turned their letter in yet. So just know that, again, this is part of the process that's going to be a little bit outside of your control. And so the more that you can be really clear in your communication and the more that you
Mhm.
can work like way ahead of the deadline, it's going to make your life a lot easier.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I've gotten a question. Actually, I'll just wait. I know this is one of your questions.
Okay, or you can go into it now. That's fine. I
I'll
mean,
tell
start
yeah, I'm
interviewing
gonna
the
jump ahead
interviewer.
a
That's
little bit.
fine.
I'm gonna jump ahead a little bit. So then I think the follow-up to that, and again, I got this question a lot just because I worked as a school counselor in high school for years. And it was like, well, how do I know if they did it? So now if you're doing it on Common App, you'll know that they got the email sent. You won't necessarily know that it's been uploaded, but if you're doing it on if your school is using an outside source, like an app where it's like Naviance or School Links or Score, where your Common App is attached to it, and as soon as you apply, basically everything will get sent. You can ask your school counselor if those teachers' letters have been uploaded to Naviance or Score. So then you'll know that they're done, and then basically, if you have Naviance or Score, again, not every student does, but it is a really great feature. If you are one of those students, once you've applied, you can log into Naviance, Score, School Links, any of those types of apps, and you'll be able to see that your transcripts were sent, that your letters were sent. Again, if you are not using those, the Common App doesn't tell you specifically, um, but those apps who kind of work like mailboxes, they do give you that feature.
Yeah, and individual colleges within their application portals will also sometimes tell you like the status of your application. So they'll say like
Yeah.
it's in process or it's complete or we're still waiting on your letters of recommendation, things like that. So that's also
Once you've
something that you
applied.
can double check in the portal.
Yeah, once you've applied, you can check it in the portal. If you haven't
Yeah.
applied yet, and you're like, oh, I'm back at school in September. Like, did Miss B write my letter over the summer? You can check in Naviance Score if it's been uploaded to the portal, and then that way, once you've applied, it can get sent with the rest of your docs, like your transcript and all those things.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a little
Um,
confusing, but again, you have us to ask questions too for your specific thing. We're just trying to give the general
Yeah, and
email.
school counselors also do a lot with these letters too. So it's also something where like, your mood prep counselor can help you kind of understand the process, but there's also things where sometimes the easiest thing to do is just going to be to follow up with your school counselor just to check how your school does it. And then also kind of what information that they have about what's been done, what's still pending, what still needs to be done.
Exactly.
We already sort of talked about Naviance and Score and school links and all that kind of stuff, but um, if my school is using one of those services or one of those apps, how does that change the process based on what we've been talking about so far?
Yeah, so I think this kind of gets into what you said, like always refer back to your school counselor and see what their process is. I've done it a few different ways at a few different schools, and some of these systems vary, and they even vary within themselves based on like what subscription your school district has. So generally, it's all the same. You get to choose what teachers you're sending for which schools. You get to make sure that everything is going and getting sent electronically. Um, I worked at a school once where they said, do not ask the teachers on Common App to be a recommender. Just leave that part blank and only ask. You can request on Score or Naviance instead, because essentially you're doing it twice. It really just depends. But yes, if you are using an app, it will be different than it will likely be different than all of just like the Common App tutorials, because Common App is just that in itself. Naviance and Score, school links, those items, those apps are used to support the school district and the Common App itself. So it's just kind of like a middleman mailbox situation. Um, so yes, it will. I think these are the general steps. Always ask your school counselor. And then typically, I've never worked at a school this didn't happen at. Within the first week to 10 days of school, there will be a senior assembly and they will tell you and probably have a packet for you or an email will go out with a PDF to a Canva document about all of the steps.
Yeah, so definitely shout out to not skip that assembly
Yeah.
on the first
Yeah.
week of school. Not that, any of our mid-prep students are doing that, but maybe pass that on to your friends.
Yeah.
Another question that I hear a lot is it annoying to be a recommender? Or how do I make sure that things are the most convenient for my recommender? Or, how do I know that I'm not like bothering my recommender as I'm asking them for all of these letters. Any tips about that?
Yeah, I mean, if you're a high school student, especially in the older grades, it's kind of comes with the territory. They're, expected to be writing letters. Some teachers and some schools will even set limits and say, the AP Lit teacher only writes 30 per year. That's it. Be the first one. I start accepting applications for students to become a student. I write a red letter of Rec for April 1st. And then, the first 25 that ask me, and that's it, or whatever it is. Um, Communication is key. Ask them once in person and then follow up via email with all of the facts. I plan to apply early. These are my top 5 schools. Here's my resume. Here's a copy of my transcript. And as a reminder, I'll be interning this summer, whatever it may be. Um, Clear communication. Don't keep asking. If you are one of those people that know that you're going to be anxious about this, which is not uncommon, I like to say set yourself up for success there and say, hey, since this is my first time doing this, when can I expect this to be done by? Not that you're setting them a deadline, but you're saying, I'm new to all this. I'll be applying by November 1st. What's the process on your end? And how can I know for sure? Like, can I expect it? Yes, my deadline's this day, but I'll be applying maybe 2 weeks earlier. Like, what is my expectation from you? What can I expect from you? It's not you pressuring them, it's not you like telling them I need this or whatever, but it's kind of like giving you some ease so that way you're not sitting there in July like or in August right now. Where's my letter? Where's my letter? Where's my letter? Teachers have the summer off. A lot of times they're doing it over the summer. A lot of times they're going to then upload it, right before back to school. They typically have to have like 5 days in school before students get there. And that's typically when a lot of this gets done. But if you want to know for your own like personal benefit, you can sometimes ask like a leading question like that.
Yeah, I feel like I hear this a lot too with not teachers necessarily, but when you've like been out shadowing somewhere and you're
Yeah.
like the physician that I shadowed, like they're amazing. I had such a good experience with them, but they're super busy. Like, are they going to be able to get my letter done? So that's a case where one, I think you need to ask yourself, like, is this person going to have time to write my letter? Is this person going to have time to upload them when I apply to schools? I mean, I think honestly, ask yourself that question. But then I think also that's just another reason why you should be working kind of well ahead of the deadline. Just make sure that this person knows when you're going to be applying, when that letter is going to be due, and so that they can have that in their minds as they're working with you as well. And then also a reminder that like they're really just going to be writing that one letter and then just uploading that over and over again. And so usually it's not that annoying because they're just getting an email that says like, hey, now's the time to upload this letter. Now's the time to send it off. But that's also
Mhm.
why it can be useful to be clear about when your deadlines are, how many schools you're applying to, how many schools you're going to need their letter for, things like that.
Yeah.
Okay. I feel like the other one that I get a lot and, very fitting here at Moon Prep is there a difference for letters for BSMD programs than from letters for like a normal college application process?
The only difference really is, I mean, maybe who you're looking for in terms of teachers. If you're not BSMD, you might want like an English or something, but if you are, you're definitely going to want your STEM, um, potentially. The other thing is sometimes since a lot of BSMDs have supplemental applications, just to apply to the school, maybe they'll say, hey, you need 2 letters of recommendation to apply to these to Penn State or whatever college. And then your supplemental application will then potentially ask for more letters of recommendation. Um, so that's really the only main difference. I mean, deadlines, we talked about, but and then those would be uploaded on the actual portal. So there's a lot of portals that happen, and I think it's very confusing for students. Um, Common App, once you apply to that school, you are no longer going back to Common App for that school. Like there's no reason to ever look at it again for that college. That's not where you're going to receive your information about whether they received anything, whether you got in, none of that. Once you've applied, within like 24 to 48 hours, you'll receive an email with a portal to that school's portal, a link to that school's portal. And then that's where you can potentially upload other things if they will accept it. Maybe that's where they'll say, hey, here's your supplemental application. Here's room for a resume. Here's room for another letter. Like sometimes things will happen in there, but after you've already applied.
And then I think related to that, sometimes get questions about like, is there a way to submit a letter of recommendation that is not going through the Common App or is not going through
Mhm.
one of these unified application platforms or is not going through my school's like letter app? Is there any other way to get a letter of recommendation to a school?
Only on that portal, or a supplemental application portal, which will come essentially from the school's portal. Yeah, kind of going back, we don't want to be emailing anybody anything unless they're specifically asking for it. We don't want to email and ask if we can email them anything. It kind of goes, there's so many applicants. Someone said this to me a few years ago. I don't remember exactly who, but it was like, if you can't follow basic directions, why do they want you at their Ivy League school? And that kind of like really hit me. It's like, yeah, yes, everyone has amazing people who will talk amazing things about them. And I understand the stress and the pressure, and you want to really just have them know how great you are. But it really comes down to like following basic instructions.
Yeah, that's such a good point because all colleges have some form of quirk or a unique way that they want to do things through their application process. There's no such thing as like a perfectly standardized, it's like this for every single school. And then once you add in the specialized programs like BSMD programs, they also have their own requirements. So I think that's a big component of that, of just making sure that you are reading instructions, making sure that you are checking your email to see if you've gotten any communication from the schools, making sure that if they give you a portal, you are creating a username and password and you're logging onto the portal regularly. There is just a lot of decision following and a lot of reading that needs to happen in order to have a really successful application process. And we, of course, are here to help you along the way. But that's also a lot of what we're doing as we're helping you as well, as we're going, okay, let me make sure that I'm reading exactly what it says in this school's portal. Let me make sure I'm reading exactly what it says and how to apply instructions. And that is true for letters of recommendation, and it's true for everything else that we are working on.
Exactly.
I think those were all the questions, Nicole. Anything
Okay.
else that you feel like you hear about letters of recommendation or anything else that would be useful to leave students with at the end of this episode?
I mean, not necessarily, nothing really specific, but just I think that's a really good note that we ended on. Like, keep in mind this is their process. Don't get frazzled. Understand the school's process, your high school's process, and then you'll be set up for success. Clear communication. We say this all the time, like as counselors at Moon Prep, we're not only setting up for success with your applications, but hopefully for college and like career readiness as well. And these are just things that you'll follow with you. Clear communication, set expectations, rule following. Um, but yeah, now that we're in August, we try to keep these episodes pretty cyclical. So definitely make sure to tune in through the next few months. Everything should be pretty relevant to what's going on at the moment. And yeah, that's about it.
Thanks for
Thank
having
you.
me on.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. And I'm excited for you to be on in the future as well.
I'll be back.